Okay, so here we are in After Effects. I'm going to create a new composition. I'm going to name my composition Rain. I'm using the HDTV 1080 preset, which will give me a 1920 by 1080 composition, and I'll click OK. So the scene I set up, it has a static image of a ground with water on it. So it looks like a rain scene that just got done raining of a street scene. So the first thing I'll do is bring that image in. I'm going to go over to my project window and select my background. So this has just an image. If I play this back, there's no rendering, there's no animation. It's just a static image of a rainy scene. And that'll be my first layer. Now I'll bring in my animation of my raindrops. So I'm going to select the very first frame of raindrops and make sure that Import JPEG Sequence is selected. And then I'll bring all of my animation in. So I rendered out 1,000 frames of rain because I wanted to be able to have plenty of render time to really have my rain look really nice and have the audience really see what my rain looks like. So with my rain imported, I'll drag this down into my composition. If I put that at the top layer and scrub through, you can see it raining. So if I back away, change my focus, and now play this back. You can see I've got my water drops coming down, hitting the ground as we set up in Maya. So now we've got our rendered images in. So now you can see we've got our rain falling in our alpha. And then we also have our ground plane. So in this situation, what I'm going to do is use this background as my main element that's going to show my rain, and then I'm going to mask this with our rain particles. And then for our final composition, I'm going to put an extra copy below this image. That will be our background image. So, because once I set this scene up to be a mask, the background's going to disappear. So to mask our image, you could also use a solid image. If you want to put a solid color behind for a rain, you could use that. I like to use the actual image. That helps make the rain, because it's going to be semi-transparent, so it's going to look like whatever's behind it. So that's why I'm using the ground image as my mask, and then I'll add the main scene behind it. In this scenario, I'm going to use what inside of After Effects, what's known as Luma matte inside of After Effects, and what that does is it looks at a black and white mask above an image in this layer stack inside of After Effects and uses that as a mask. So with my main image at the bottom and then my image sequence of my mask from Maya above, if I go to ground and select Luma matte, that will allow me to see through and see my raindrops falling. This isn't really obvious. Now let me bring an extra image in the background. So if I put another ground image behind or underneath my main composition, play this back, So now we're getting masked raindrops, but you still can't see them yet because it's the same image that's being masked and is actually moving. So what we need to do is exaggerate or adjust the settings on the image that's being shown. So if I select the second ground image, the one that's being masked, and add an effect to it, so if I go to Effects, and I'm going to adjust the color, so color correction, and I'm going to adjust the brightness and contrast. So I'm going to adjust the contrast, so with my brightness and contrast effect applied to my masked layer, I can open this up and see all of my effects and all my attributes. So if I change the contrast, so I'll change the brightness. There you see I can make them a little more white. So if I zoom in a little closer, we can actually start seeing the raindrops if I change the brightness. So I change the brightness to make here I'll exaggerate. So now you can really see it. So if I play this back, now we can see the contrast is very bright and washed out. And it's a little bit over the top. So let's make this a little, let's lessen this effect. So if I change the brightness, and then also I could adjust the contrast to make them a little more visible. And play this back. We can subtly see the raindrops falling. So now we can see the raindrops falling. And it looks a little bit mechanical or a little more computer generated. It looks very sharp and in focus. So what I can do is, for this ground plane image, actually for the mask, I can blur it a little bit. If I look at just the mask, you can see it's very sharp. So if I select my mask or my drops layer and add the effect of blurring, so if I go to Effects, Blur, and if I put a directional blur, a slight directional blur, and just blur them, let's say 15 on the motion blur. And if I bring this back and play it, now it's not so noticeable, they're not so sharp, they're a little bit blurred. And if we really zoom in, it's kind of hard to see, but you can see the effect happening of rain coming down and little splashes occurring. So here is our rain using an image that we're compositing using the alpha that we rendered out of Maya. Now you don't need to use a background image. You can also use just a static solid image in the background. If I remove my composite image, the ground image from my composite, and if we create a new static solid, so if we go to Layer, New, and select Solid, I can select a color that I want the rain to look like. So if I wanted to choose maybe like an aquamarine color, I could choose a solid color that can be in my composite. If I place it below my raindrops composition, remember the composition, the mask has to be on the very top, and my aqua color for my rain is just below that. And for that layer, again, change to the Luma matte, and that will show through the aqua color as my mask color. So now you can see we're getting that mask color of just the aqua showing up. Now you've also got blending modes just like in Photoshop inside of After Effects. We could adjust the blending effect to something like divide. So if we select the divide, that will divide the color and create some interesting effect. We get like some rainbow, we get some color splashing into the color itself, so we're getting some reds being introduced that could possibly be in our scene and make it look a little more interesting. So you've got all these Photoshop type of blending modes you can experiment with as well. So you can add a solid color that will be composited, or if you want to use an image that we just used previously, I just used the background image to composite. And then I just adjusted the blurriness for the matte, the raindrops, I blurred those a little bit. And then for the composition that the mask was masking out, I just brightened that up. You can adjust the brightness with brightness and contrast, just like in Photoshop, and make your raindrops look just the way you want them. So there you have it. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much.